Commissioners. All righty. The time is approximately, I'm sorry.
Testing, are we getting anywhere?
Takes those seconds.
Test. Testing. Hello? Yeah. Testing.
Testing.
You have to hold it down until they come.
Testing.
There we go. There you go. There you go.
You might need a mute button for me over there.
Get the message. Okay, thank you. The time is approximately 7 p.m. and the April 18th, 2024 Farragut Municipal Planning Commission will now begin. First off, I'd like to wish you all a good evening and thank you, those of you that are in attendance tonight. I want to thank you for attending tonight's Farragut Municipal Planning Commission meeting, and my name is Scott Russ. I'm the chairman that will be conducting tonight's meeting. We appreciate that everyone who's taken time out of your schedules to attend tonight's meeting to observe how our town government works. And be noted that all Farragut Municipal Planning Commission meetings are public notice per Tennessee state law. This meeting is being audio and video recorded tonight and will be posted on the Farragut YouTube channel. And links to this and other Planning Commission meetings and recordings may be also found on the Town of Farragut website. Any of you that are in attendance should be able to pick up a copy of the agenda at the door when you came in tonight. For anybody here tonight who would like to address this commission concerning an item on tonight's agenda, please pick up a blue comment card at the door when you came in, and if you would write your name and address and the agenda number item that you wish to comment on, and present that to Mr. Shipley, please. There will also be time reserved at the end of the business meeting for residents' comments on non-agenda subjects, which also requires that you fill out a blue card and pass that on to Mr. Shipley. In order to conduct efficient, business-like meetings, the town has adopted rules for how its meetings will be conducted. These rules are designed to keep the meeting progressing along, assure that all points of view are heard and considered, and to provide common courtesy to everyone. We ask that you observe the established meeting protocols found on the backside of the agenda that you received when you came in the door, and follow those items when you're addressing members of the Planning Commission, please. And also, as a side note, I'd just like to note that there have been some editorial changes to the comments protocol that are also found on the back of the agenda tonight. So now I would like to ask that if you're able, please stand for a moment of silence for prayer and reflection to be followed by the recital of the Pledge of Allegiance to our country's flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First, I'd like to ask the commissioners if anybody has any announcements or recognitions they'd like to make this evening. No? Okay, Mark, I've established that we have 8 commissioners present, and therefore we have a quorum for tonight's proceedings. Absent is Commissioner Preston. Mark, are there any amendments to the agenda?
No, sir.
Move to approve.
Second.
With the motion on the floor, let all in favor say yes.
Yes.
Noes? No noes. Let the record show the agenda as posted has been approved. Approval of the, Mark, are there any amendments to the minutes from the March 21st meeting?
No, sir.
Move to approve.
Second.
A second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Noes? Let the record show that the posted March 21st, 2024 minutes have been approved. Okay, so business items tonight, Mark. Looks like we have 5 items for consideration, 2 action items, and 3 items that are up for discussion purposes only. And we'll start with agenda item number 1. That's a request, or it's agenda item number 3, rather. Request for approval for the installation of 6-inch MDP pipe along a section of the south side of Kingston Pike, east of Little Turkey Creek Commons, to and along a portion of the west side of Old Stage Road, and 2-inch MDP pipe from Old Stage Road to Wyndham Road and from Old Stage Road along a short section of the north side of Summersworth Drive, just past the intersection of Windhurst Road. KUB is the applicant, and I believe this was an item that was pulled off the agenda in March.
Yeah, they had requested postponement last month. This is just some gas line extensions, as the caption said.
The mic's not on.
In the, yeah, it's on. It should be. I just need to be closer to it, I think. But you can see on the map there that there's a section along Kingston Pike east of Little Turkey Creek Commons that goes to Old Stage Road, and then a couple of sections coming in from Old Stage Road into the Wentworth subdivision. It's both 6-inch and 2-inch gas lines. And it's a pretty straightforward project. It will all be directional bored, except for where they have to come out, and tie in at the different tie-in locations. But everything else will be directional boring. The staff is recommending approval of this request, subject to obtaining a right-of-way permit from the engineering department, notifying all the affected property owners, and they are going to need to obtain an access permit from TDOT because for the work that they'll be doing along Kingston Pike. So with those three subject tos, the staff recommends approval of this project.
Okay, before we move on for discussion, based on Mark's information he's provided, I'll need a motion and a second.
Move for approval. Second.
Okay, we have a second. Mark, do you have anybody signed up to speak on this topic?
No, sir. No, sir.
No. Is there anybody from the staff representation that would like to address any questions? And if you would please state your name and address, please. Thank you.
Colt Watson, 4505 Millbrook Pike, AG.
Okay, with that, I'm going to open up to the floor. Commissioner Devlin, do you have any questions or comments you'd like to make regarding this agenda item?
Pass.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Poplin?
I don't have any.
Commissioner Myers?
None.
Commissioner Green?
I have none.
Commissioner Pinchuk?
I have none.
Vice Chairman St. Clair?
I have none.
And Mayor Williams?
None.
Okay. With a motion that's been seconded on the floor, I'll ask if the motion stands as presented. If so, we'll close this discussion and ask all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Noes? No noes. Let the record show that agenda item number 3 has been approved unanimously with a vote of 8-0. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Okay. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the fiscal year 2025 to 2030 5-year capital investment plan. Do you want to go ahead, Allison Martin, or do you want to talk about it? We'll let Allison.
I'll turn it over to Allison Myers. She's the expert on this one.
But Allison Myers, Finance Director, and I'll be presenting this tonight, and this is David, as a TCMA conference. And so it's weird being on this side for an evening. But the purpose of this item is to present to you the proposed capital investment program for fiscal year 25. The annual budget process is underway. And part of that process, the planning commission annually reviews the list of projects proposed by the mayor and aldermen. The CIP is broken down into 3 main sections: the general government projects, parks projects, and engineering projects. And the proposed CIP has been reviewed at 3 DMA workshops, which we've talked about a lot. Planning commission's role is to make recommendations on the priorities of each project to the board of mayor and aldermen, with also taking the final determination for funding during the adoption of the fiscal year 25 budget. So we'll just jump into a review of the main projects. What we're really looking at tonight are the ones for FY 25. The ones for 26 through 30 are for planning purposes only for future projects. So our first one under the general and governmental projects is land acquisition. There's no funding proposed for this one for 25 or 26, so we start with 27 through 30. The Kingston Pike pedestrian underpass at North Orchard Creek, that is slated to begin in fiscal year 26. And that's going to be a connection through the culvert that will be east of 35 North and connect to the Greenway behind the river. The Sonia Drive and Admiral Road project, sidewalk project, is a Dam Trailhead is slated for 26. We had talked about it for 25, but First Utility District is doing a large sewer project, so we'll bump that one to 26 to 26. And so that will start once the First Utility project is completed. The Evergreen project, Greenway Connection, is for fiscal year 27. Town facility security plan, we started with McKee Park, we have cameras there, but now we're going to broaden that whole security. So we're going to move it to CIP, and we're going to do, so this will include cameras, key card access. Our first projects will be Mayor Bob Leonard and the new town hall once it's completely renovated. Our next section is Parks and Recreation. These three projects are actually going to be funded through the local Parks and Recreation grant. It's a 50-50 split. The first one is Mayor Bob Leonard Field 1 and 2 turf replacement. It's actually going to be on the board's agenda, I think, next time, if that day opening. The next one is the Mayor Bob Leonard Walk Trail and ADA repair and repaving. This is for fiscal year 25, also in that LPRF grant. McKee Park Phase 5, which is the dog park and storage facility. A new one this year is the Mayor Bob Leonard Pickleball Complex. That's going to be 8 pickleball courts, a parking lot, and field 5 upgrades to the play surface and moving the lighting. That's about $1.45 million. The next one is McPhee Park Splash Pad upgrades and just repair. This for fiscal year 25 is $50,000, and then planning for 28 will be $80,000. The sand volleyball complex reconstruction is also part of the LPRF grant, and that's what we're looking to do that one in FY 26. Anchor Park fencing will be in fiscal year 27. The Anchor Park playground replacements in FY 27. Also in 27 is McPhee Park additional tennis court, tennis pavilion, and restrooms, and that's for fiscal year 27. And fiscal year 28, we're looking at upgrading the Mayor Bob Leonard trail lighting. Also in 28 will be the Field 3 turf replacement at Mayor Bob Leonard. 28 is also the Key Park tennis and basketball court resurfacing. And moving to engineering projects, stormwater improvement, we're putting $200,000 per year into that. It's kind of a savings account, if you will, for stormwater and the CIP. We're working on a larger project right now in the ARPA fund. That is also for stormwater. The next 3 are Wood Station Road improvements. They're all slated for 25. The first one is the roundabout at Wood Station. The next one is a cost share of the developer for the road improvements and a cost share of the developer for the greenway connections. Union Road is another one for 25. This will be the construction phase. We're currently in the right-of-way process, and the construction phase estimate is $9.1 million. This is a cost share of 80-20 split with the state. Also, cost share with the state for an 80-20 split is the Virtue Road Phase 2 Brookmere to Wood Station Road project. The right-of-way acquisition is slated for fiscal year 25, and that's $925,000. Turkey Creek Road and Greenway improvements is also in fiscal year 25. That's going to be the right-of-way. Currently, we're in the final stage of the design, and this will be the addition of a greenway along Turkey Creek Road and some road improvements. Fiscal year 26, we have the Watt Road roundabout. This is a new project. It's the Concord Road Loop Road signal. It's in fiscal year 25 for a cost of $700,000. Also, a new project is Cable Station Road Jamestown Boulevard signal. Also, it's in fiscal year 26 for $700,000. And looking further out will be the Evans Road improvements. Fiscal year 29 is the design, 30 is the right-of-way, and then the construction will be further out past that. If there's no questions, staff recommends the approval of the fiscal year 25 to 30 capital investment program to the town of Farragut, Board of Maryland.
Before we make a motion, I think, Allison, we took the McPhee Park courts and tennis pavilion out.
We left them in there,
Okay.
and then we all make a decision later.
Are you kidding me? But, I leave in August, right?
Well, they're in 2027.
Yeah, they're 27 there. So they're not approving that right now anyway. It's just.
I understand, but I thought we had talked about, I thought we had just decided to take them off altogether.
A placeholder.
and leave that space open. So, anyway, all right, that's all I had. I'll have a move to approve with that.
We have a move to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, with that said, I'll open it up to the floor. Allison, thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation. You know, obviously, these are all much needed and much welcome investment opportunities. Obviously, there are some of them that we'd like to see pulled ahead, but the budget currently doesn't allow for that. Thank you very much. I'll open up with Commissioner Devlin. Comments or any input?
My only comment would be it's exciting. I think a lot of those projects are very worthwhile.
Vice Mayor Pavlin.
The only thing everyone should know is the Sonia Drive Admiral Road Sidewalk Project also includes a stretch of Sonia Drive between Admiral and Dundee. There will be improvements to that portion of the road. It's very narrow, so we're widening that portion and putting the sidewalk along Sonia and Admiral. So obviously, those designs will come to us. So just wanted to let you know.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Myers?
I do not have any questions.
Commissioner Green?
I do have a couple questions. I went kind of faster. What is the Turkey Creek Greenway / road improvements? Is that the sidewalk along the,
Connection.
Yeah, that's the sidewalk along.
connects the
Road
existing one over?
Yeah.
Swerve to Third Street.
Okay, and there's going to be road work there as well?
Road improvement there too. There's
Okay.
some widening of the road there.
All right. The other question I have is on the source of funding. Can you answer a question on that, perhaps? I'm trying to look through that first block there where it says funding sources. And the total is 18.75 million there. And it looks like that about half of that is grant money. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of the grant money for this year will be around, that
Nine.
with the Union Road will be a large portion of that. That's the construction. I think it's 9.1, and then 80% of that will be through the state, and the other 20% will be the town area, and that number is, yeah, so for that project,
It's like $1.9 million.
yeah, so our portion of that 1.8, and then the state will be 7.2 million in grants for that project.
So 9.1's the total. Well, I guess
9.1 is the total.
I guess I'd like to say kudos to the folks that are working on grants around here.
That'll be Daryl. Daryl is amazing at getting.
Well, it's pretty incredible, actually. We got an $18.7 million and half of it's coming from,
Yeah.
not coming from our revenues, from the town revenue stream. I think that's,
Three of the large park projects are funded 50% through the LPRF grant. We
Yeah.
just got notification of that in January.
I think that's great. It really is. Like
what we
kudos
did.
to those folks. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Commissioner Pinchot, would you like to add
Yeah,
anything?
I have a question concerning that grant money. When are we actually going to get the money so we can start, for example, the parking fee and the dog
So
park?
the parking permit fee, we're waiting for the contract from the state.
So we've got the money already?
Well, so for all of these projects, the ones that are the 80-20 splits and the ones, LPR grants, we actually spend the money and we request reimbursement from the state. So that's why we have to budget the full amount and
Got
then
it.
show the revenue share at the bottom. We'll spend the whole money and then ask for reimbursement.
I was a little concerned because when we won the bid for the opportunity to put in the dog park, we had so much time to actually build that dog park. And I want to make sure that we get started and
Yeah,
build
the
it.
good thing with that one is it's not as restrictive as the ARPA funding. The ARPA funding, we have to have contracted for all expenditures by the end of this fiscal year, or in this calendar year, and have to have it all expended by at the end of '26. So we're doing really good on that side.
Okay.
This one's a little more flexible.
Good. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinchot. Vice Mayor St. Clair, would you like to add anything as well?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, I guess, on Union Road. I know it's a, a large sum of money, but you said it's reimbursed. What time is is it once you have the bid opening, know the cost it's gonna be, or is it, you have to wait till completion of the project?
Okay, so what you'll do is, pretty much, we get an invoice for my contract, whoever's doing the work
Yeah.
on it. We get the invoice, we'll pay the invoice, and then we pretty much just wait for the canceled check to clear the bank, so we can show the state we have paid this invoice for
progress payment, or is it, okay.
Kind of like a gigantic expense account.
Okay.
You show the receipt, you pay.
And any idea, I know Darrell's not here, but any idea of the kind of the schedule, or looking to have the bids opening and bids let? Yeah, and then construction?
Never. Never happening. It's pie in the sky
It's already
dream.
too long.
So Union Road, we have to actually go back to TPO to ask for some additional funding for that construction of that. The estimates are coming a little higher than
Okay.
anticipated.
So you already have that.
10 years in the making.
They're waiting for the vice mayor to.
Vice
vacate.
Mayor?
Yes. They're waiting for me to die, is what they're doing.
Okay.
Well, David said you'll never make questions, so I'm gonna tell him he's wrong.
They weren't that tough.
Tell him you did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Allison. Okay, we have a motion that's been seconded on the floor. I'll ask if the motion stands as presented. So discussion's now completed. I'll ask if all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any noes? No
Thank
noes?
you, Allison.
Commissioner Myers abstains.
Commissioner Myers abstain. Let the record show that agenda item number 4 for the approval of the CIP plan for 2025 to 2030 has been approved with a vote of 7 in favor, 1 abstention. Moving on to item number 5, and this item is for discussion purposes only. Request to amend the future land use map for parcels 070 and 072, tax map 142, between Waverly Court subdivision and Baldwin Park subdivision, located at 341 Boring Road, from open space cluster residential to very low density residential, 12 acres, Homestead Land Holdings applicant.
Yeah, these are two parcels that were part of the Boring Road study area plan, and we worked with the community on making amendments to our future land use map. Originally, these parcels were classified as medium-density residential, and then as throughout the process of amending the future land use map with the community, it was changed to open space cluster residential. And the reason for that was these tracts are sandwiched between an attached single-family development, Waverly Court, which is zoned R4, and then a small lot single-family detached residential development, Baldwin Park. So the thought was it might be a good candidate for an OSMR zoning district where you could have the attached maybe on the west part of the property and the detached on the east to transition to what's around them. So that was the logic of how it got it classified as open space cluster. As we'll discuss in the next agenda item, which is obviously related to this one, the applicant's requesting to rezone property to small lot, single-family residential R3. They did look at the OSMR, and they looked at the R4 attached single-family, but they felt like, given the size of the tracts, 12 acres really wasn't large enough to make an OSMR work. Due to the 35% open space requirement. And then with the school likely to be built to the east of Baldwin Park, it felt like a traditional single-family detached subdivision would probably be more marketable for families and school, that have school-age children. So that's how they ended up with the R3 as a zoning district request. And the future land use map classification that's most similar to that is very low density residential. And a lot of the other properties along Boring Road's corridor are of that land use. So this is not really out of character with other parcels in that particular area. So from a staff's perspective, this is a pretty straightforward request. It is a future land use designation and ultimately a zoning map designation that's consistent with the surrounding plan of development. It's the same as Baldwin Park, basically, and probably would result in a very similar type of development. So this is just a workshop item this evening, but when it does come up for a vote, likely next month, the staff will recommend approval of this. This is one thing to point out is the road was actually Boring Road was actually improved across the frontage of the north parcel here, and it actually went across the frontage of Baldwin Park. So as far as improvements to Boring Road, there wouldn't be any required as part of the rezoning. They will need to work with the town engineer as to what level of traffic impact study that he might want to see. I think it's probably just going to be a level 1. So it's pretty minimal. But that's kind of an overview of this request. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer.
I'll go open the floor for any questions or comments for the applicant.
I think both of these are pretty much no-brainers.
Pretty much.
Seems like it, yep.
Okay.
I think it's very consistent and compatible with what's there.
I don't have any further comments.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rackley. Appreciate your time.
There's still daylight to mow grass.
Yes, that's right. See how something, anything.
Oh, no, you don't want that. No.
Thank you.
And I agree completely with staff's recommendation and assessment.
How often does that happen? Woohoo!
Yeah.
No, we think it would be good. Happy to answer any questions and move on to the next item. So choose.
I think we're ready to move on to, I'm sorry?
Well, I'm sure if you had any public comment.
We don't have any.
Well, I haven't had anyone sign up to speak on this item.
I have one resident that I speak to from Baldwin Park, and he basically emailed me, says, if I'm not missing anything, this seems pretty straightforward. And I said, I don't think you're missing anything, and it's pretty straightforward.
And if you recall, the staff developer, there were
Several.
members from
Yeah.
Baldwin Park, and
Yeah.
it's basically going to be a similar.
Yeah.
Be a nice fit. All right, we're ready to move on to the next item. Agenda item number 6. Also for discussion purposes only, discussion on a request to amend the zoning map for parcels 070 and 072, tax map 142, between Waverly Court subdivision and Baldwin Park subdivision, 341 Boring Road, from R1 to R2 to R3, 12 acres, again, Homestead Land Holdings applicant.
Really, this has basically already been reviewed in relation to the first item, so this is just a zoning map amendment to R3, which is consistent with Baldwin Park. So, again, the staff is in support of this amendment request as well.
Just to clarify, the 12 acres is actually 2 separate parcels, and one is
Yep.
zoned R1 and one is zoned R2. So we would obviously combine those to R3 and then come back with parcel.
All right, very good. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. See you all next month.
Yep. Very good, look forward to it.
Thank you, Russ. You're on a roll. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming.
Agenda item number 7, discussion on amendments to the sign ordinance in association with the mixed-use town center area. J.A. Fielden, applicant.
Yeah, this one, I'll just give you a brief overview. This is for discussion purposes only. As the Biddle Farm project has been moving along, it's become evident that there's some signage that some of the tenants would like to have that is not currently provided for in the sign ordinance. And also, there's maybe some guidance that we need from the Planning Commission and the board on flexibility in colors and illumination and things like that. So there were actually 3 separate components to the requested text amendment. And just keep in mind that this should not be thought of in relation to a specific development. It really, think of it more broadly, that if we change the ordinance language, it could apply to anyone in the mixed-use town center or potentially a larger area, depending on what it is. So just try not to get hung up on a specific development. But the first request that they have submitted is what's called a canopy sign. Let me show you some images of that. Actually, the Super Chicks is proposing one, and that's the first commercial building just to the east of Chase Bank that's now open. And they would like to put a sign at the end of this structural canopy, which is about a 20-inch thick canopy that's structurally part of the building. In looking at this and part of the staff developer discussion on April 2nd, staff developed some questions that I think would be helpful to talk with the Planning Commission about in order to give us some guidance on ordinance language dealing with this matter. I'm just going to scroll through some pictures again, first of all, to give you some context. But these are some examples of canopy signs as envisioned in this context in other communities. We'll deal with illumination here in a minute. But there's all kinds of different styles and approaches to these. And frankly, staff's in support of providing for this type of sign. I think we see these a lot in downtowns. I think it could add a lot of character to some of the buildings. But there's some specifics, and there's always the devil in the detail thing that we want to be careful about and not, compromise the very attractive buildings that are being built out there with some signage that maybe could detract from the buildings if not done properly. So one of the questions I think that would need to probably be talked about is really defining what a canopy is in this context. And it would appear that it would need to be like a permanent metal structural component of the building itself, because that's really kind of what all these canopy signs were associated with. So I think that's something we may need to clarify in the definitions part of the sign ordinance. What is a canopy sign? What's a canopy? Because we don't want people to think that you can put, maybe they're considering an awning a canopy, and we may or may not want signage on those. So is the commission open to this type of sign, first of all? I mean, I know we talked about it at the staff developer meeting. Before we start going through these other questions, does this seem like a good addition to the sign ordinance to provide for this?
I'm definitely open to it.
Okay.
But the language, this would be something in lieu of a wall-mounted sign.
Yes, that's
So it's
one
kind
of the
an either-or
questions.
situation.
That's right, yes.
I think we need to talk about size and scale.
Okay.
But I think this would be a great addition to our downtown district, and I'd like to personally move forward with something like this. Obviously, the devil's in the details, but I personally do support this style of sign.
I feel the same way.
Okay.
I support it. I think it's a clean look and captures your attention. I do have a question about number 2. I don't know if you want to go to that.
Yeah, I assume everybody's open to this type of sign, so we'll just go to the next one. Yeah, one of the questions is, as we look through this, again, trying to develop some specifics, is whether the sign should be mounted on the canopy where it's in front of the building and not kind of out in space to the side. So if you look at, for example, the Super Chicks, if you looked at this building, the sign they're proposing is mounted in this general location, which is in front of the face of the building. A question would be whether there should be the possibility to mount a sign in this area. I think staff's position is probably we would prefer it to be in this particular location, in other words, in front of the building that it represents.
And to identify the entrance.
Yeah, and to identify the entrance area.
That's a key address.
So really, these should be kind of focused near entrance areas. That's one of the questions. Okay.
I think so.
And then kind of over obviously it'd be in front of the building if it was in front of the entrance. So, okay, I think that answered a couple of questions.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
And that deal also with the side, right, the canopy.
Yeah, we'll
surround
talk
the building.
about that. Yeah, a lot of these signs in the town center, again, I'm not just thinking of this building,
All are quarters, so-
but they're really kind of facing a pedestrian setting, and so the sign that's going to be on Kingston Pike, for example, for this building, it's understandable that that would be a little larger, but on the pedestrian sides of these buildings, there's really a question of when does a sign really become kind of a little overwhelming based on the fact that it's in a kind of a pedestrian environment. You're already going to know where you're at when you're back there. So one of the things that I think in talking about with proportionality is I think they're recommending like a letter height of 36 inches. We felt like that might be a little too much for a pedestrian scale letter size. And then maybe another thing to look at would be to proportionate the letter size to the thickness of the canopy. Because some of these, sorry, I'm having a lot of allergies, but some of these canopies are pretty thin, and some of them are pretty thick, like the Super Chicks. So, you know, kind of related to where you put these things.
Mark, can you help me out understand what you say thin versus thick as far as?
Well, like this canopy here, the thickness of this canopy is roughly 20 inches.
Okay.
So, you know, whether you want to proportion the letter height to the thickness of the canopy to give it kind of some proportionality is one question.
I think Noah said this already, Mark, but I think the scale matters a ton because the pictures look great, super classy. I think they're super attractive, but then the kind of arched giant Super Chicks, not so much.
Yeah, let's see, yeah, because that's kind of what they're proposing.
But
And
that's
kind
their
of,
logo, isn't it? Isn't their logo arched?
well, the question is, it could still have the curvature to it, but the letter height themselves may be a little less. I think those letters, are they 36 inches, Bud? Just for the letter, yeah, not counting the 48 total, counting the sub text below. So,
What
you know,
ratio do we use now in the MUTC for wall signs over individual
Solves
businesses?
that.
it's 1-to-1 and then 0.75 to 1.
Based upon
Right.
frontage length?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have any parameters on how tall the sign is. Typically, it's
On a building.
on a building.
Yeah.
The wall has some parameters, so someone could do a very long, vertical sign on the side of the building, but in this case, these canopies extend out from the front of the building, and you're walking into it, so, the scale of that sign becomes, walking into the building.
I can see there's definitely a need for this. I mean, they're at somewhat of a disadvantage because of the two-story elements that they have. On this particular tenant space, there's not a good candidate area to put that sign that identifies the entrance. So I think where we're going makes a lot of sense. I am concerned about the overall dimensions of it. Kind of like what Jeff said. I think personally what I'm seeing in that rendering, the scale looks a little too large to me. I'm okay with the arch. I understand they have a corporate logo program
Sure.
that they try to be consistent, but personally I think the scale is off on that. I think it's a little more imposing than I would like to see.
Well, let me ask you this. What's the allowed square footage of the sign if it was a wall sign?
I don't know what the width is.
It could be very large.
Because it's that one-to-one.
74 square feet.
So they have 74 lineal feet. Okay.
Yeah. I think one of the things dealing with the scale too, and it's one of the questions here, but it's kind of related, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it up, is these windows and how much, if any, are you comfortable potentially blocking with signage? The windows on these buildings are really specifically part of the design to add more transparency, to give it that town center look and feel. I think the staff's concerned about blocking the windows. I don't think this sign blocks it very much, but if it were a little bit shorter letters, it potentially could avoid blocking. Of course, at an angle, it might block it no matter what you do, but if you're just looking at it at the same height, it may avoid blocking any of the window. So that's another thing to consider in relation to the scale and the context of these signs.
Mark, I'd like to give the floor to the applicant to address
Okay.
some of these questions you have, if you would.
This on, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can talk very loud anyway, but Bud Cullum, 6312 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee. And thank you, and Mark, I agree, and Commissioner Myers, I agree, I've always been into scale. Certainly not going to try to necessarily argue scale as an architect, you've studied it a lot more than I have, but I know when I see something, and I can tell whether it looks good or not, and, explain why. I would say this toward the scale. First of all, I'd like to say two things. Is one, you would say that the Kingston Pike side is the vehicular side, and this is the pedestrian side. And there is some truth to that. Not totally. You're still coming in a car. The other thing I would say, especially as it relates to whether you're blocking the window or not, and if it's being out on the edge of the canopy, I think if you look through downtowns and historical growth of a downtown, one of the things that I think gives it character is that everything's not perfect. And sometimes you may say, you may even be inside a building and look out the window and see a little bit of that curve on the sign poking up, but that's part of what gives it character. In this case, as we all know, there's not actually going to be anyone inside looking out those windows because there's no space in it.
Yeah.
But, and again, I don't mean to sound argumentative, but I just want to point out, I think sometimes if this was made to look more like a true single-story building, I would agree that that scale is not right. I think when you apply it to the height of the overall building, instead of applying it to the thickness of the canopy fascia, I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but I'm not sure from a scale standpoint that that's what you should be focusing on as much. I think another thing in this particular building to keep in mind is everything past the yellow to the left, as you're looking until you get to the darker gray, that's all super chips. So there won't be another sign on the entire building if you get all the way to the other end. So all of a sudden, when you're looking at the length of the building, the height of that building, and the argument now, sorry, but I would argue that this is actually more in scale. I think if, Mark, if you go back to some of those pictures of real life, so stuff like that. Personally, I think the food bank of Eastern Michigan is out of scale.
It's really out of scale.
Yeah, too small.
I think the Foundry and the Cucinova, if that's the way to correctly pronounce that, are more in scale for the size of the building. I personally feel that way about what Super Chips is asking for.
I think what you're saying makes sense. I struggled with relating it to the canopy itself. I think it makes more sense to relate it to the height of the building, because that's where you're getting your feeling. To me, the feel of the scale is it does match it. I'm not getting too much concern over blocking the windows, particularly because they're not, they're
They're not functional.
they're not functional.
Although
I-
in another context, they could be,
Yes, they could be.
write regulations for just one building.
I don't disagree with you, but I believe in this case, looking at the scale of the height of the building is, to me, what you should be what we're relating the scale to, not the width of the height of the canopy, because you could have a thin canopy and then you have this little tiny sign because you've related it to the canopy instead of relating it to the building height itself.
Another thing is we're looking at a two-dimensional look.
For sure.
And when
It's-
in reality,
it's-
it's
For
It's
sure.
further out.
sign.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, so if you were on the second floor, in a true second floor, it would look totally different than what you would think it would look like right now, just like it would look totally different
Yep.
if you're a pedestrian with it.
And quite frankly, when you have when you have a functional second floor and you're in a city environment, urban environment, yeah, sometimes you're looking out at the back of a sign. 'Cause
That's lit.
Yeah, because that's the way it is.
As I've often said, and I think I meant to use this line in the staff developer meeting, we're going for continuity here, but we're not going for sterility.
Yeah.
And I think it's having an
or a lot of signs, like in Charleston, for instance, they have these. And if you're on the second floor and you're sitting there eating, you're looking out at it, but it's out. It's not right on you. I mean, there's one particular fish house that we go to that the second floor looks out over the sign, and it don't seem to be a deterrent.
I don't have an issue with the sign potentially blocking or, somewhat superimposing a two-dimensional rendering those upper windows. I'm still concerned about just overall scale of that sign. I think we decided but it's 4 feet tall, including the words chicken and custard. Is that right? It's overall about 4 feet tall. And a 4 foot tall sign, even though this particular tenant, I guess, has taken we'll call it 3 of the bays, and you're eligible based upon the 1-to-1 ratio for a big sign, I still feel like that a 4 foot tall sign in that scenario is too tall.
You know, this height is going total.
I don't know that. But their lease space is 53 feet, it's not 75, so it's 53 square feet.
So the 72 or 74 is the overall building length. Okay.
And this sign that would go here would be a smaller sign because it's less width.
Well, that bay is probably only what do you say 24 feet or
Probably 20.
Yeah.
And it will be just like the canopy wall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's no canopy.
Obviously, this is a very wide canopy station, and I think it was mentioned that about each piece is, gold are worth like 35 million. Those are much smaller. People couldn't then put canopies on. So we were trying to improve some proportion of the canopy, not less than like a certain, or not more than a certain height. Put bounds on it that are tied to canopy width, but also total height. We would consider whether or not it counted totally on top of the canopy or partially down on the station. Again, to try to get that, that better proportion. But it gets complicated if you do that with your practice. Because of the way to simplify it to where we get
I think it's by time the building height.
scale size of sign. But, we didn't have a large sign, let's say 24 or 36 stuck on the canopy over this block.
The thickness of the canopy really doesn't concern me. I think, most of these are made out of steel, and so it depends on whatever I-beam, and if you're going to wrap the I-beam in something. So I'm really not, a matter of fact, if you look at the photographs, you've got some that have kind of a real, thinner fascia, and then some, when I say the fascia, we're talking about the overall, what we're calling the thickness of the canopy.
We're getting hooked up.
I'd be reluctant to try to. I think you're getting into an area that is, all of a sudden somebody could take an additional freeze board and add it to the bottom of the canopy, and then all of a sudden they have a lot more eligibility than what we intended. So I think based on what I know right now, I think I would discourage us from trying to tie the sign height to the thickness of the canopy.
I would agree with that.
And it's about, to me, it's overall scale. It's the mass of the building and mass of the tenant space.
Yes.
No one's gonna be walking in and saying, I can't believe that little thing's holding that sign up. They're looking at it, the sign as it relates to.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me. A good structural engineer could probably design something that's real thin, that's real strong.
Yeah.
And it would meet all the needs that somebody would have for a permanent canopy, which is wind load and snow loads and everything else. So that really doesn't concern. I think, again, personally, I think our focus should be the overall scale of the elevation of the whole of the building in the particular tenant space.
Yeah, I kind of view this also generically too. We're looking at just the super chicks that you point out that could apply in the mixed-use town center or other places too. And not everybody's going to have an arch sign or what have you, but I'm overwhelmed a little bit. I really look at it in the context of the proportionality to the building face. Even though there's a bigger part of super chicks there, the eye really focuses on that one, width that front. And that's just, I know, you had it, but I don't know how you write something.
Yeah, that's a tricky
Well, I can look at something and say yes or no, or maybe this, but how I write that up generically in a, in text, it's got a
Well, I mean,
generic.
one
From a height standpoint to.
It's got to be, I think it's got to be a relationship to height and width.
Well, I mean, what we do today is, we have a pretty good ratio that we've used throughout the town that's based upon the lineal feet. And quite frankly, if that's a 4-foot tall sign, and if I took the overall square footage, it's probably over your 54 square feet of eligibility as it's designed today. So there's a ratio that the town staff has used for a lot of years that they're very accustomed to using. And I hate to get too far away from it. I'm not saying we can't tweak the ratio. I'm fine tweaking the ratio, but I'm saying how we determine the ratio, which is pretty much the length, or the width of the building, the length of the total tenant space. Obviously, when you have a taller building, you could argue that you could have eligibility for more signage, but,
Well, is that, just to go with your thought, having a sign on a one-story building, you have that square footage, but this is it seems to be a two-story building, so are we accommodating more signage space for a two-story building as opposed to a one-story building?
What if you regulated it by saying the pedestrian-facing side of the building elevation was a ratio of 0.7, can't be more than 0.75 to 1 instead of 1 to 1?
Is there a height ratio or is it just a linear?
Just
Well,
lineal. I
that
don't
would
think
be
we ever
height
used a
and
height.
width, but that way it kind of ties it to
have
the
we ever tied height into
context.
anything? I mean, I'm thinking like Kroger,
I
they
think
have some
you
big
can-
signs. They're a tall building because they've got some tall parapet walls. But I don't know if we've ever tied any overall square footage to height before, have we?
No.
It's purely based on the length.
Our Anytime Fitness sign is much bigger than everyone else's because we have
Because you have so much square, I mean, your total
Linear.
length is a bit, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of a common sense, relatively easy way to write it, that if you're on the pedestrian face of the building, to me, the signage that's on the building doesn't need to be as big as on the vehicle traveler side of the building.
I think a lot
So
of
what I'm
argument-
trying to think about is, can we create a ratio that would make the signs on the pedestrian side of buildings a little more pedestrian scale? And I don't know if that's 0.75, because we do have that as an option now, is you can have more than one sign. One can be 1 to 1. The other is 0.75 to 1. But we could basically make it that the one that faces the pedestrian area can't be more than a certain ratio, and that way it's a little bit more tied to the context.
Using that,
Just height we're referring to right now?
Well, it's the overall square footage, 0.75, it's the width of the lease space.
So if you had 50, what do we think? There's 52 or 54 feet
Yeah,
somewhere?
but if you only had one,
Up there is 47.62 square feet. This side would be their .75 side, because they've already done their other side. That's
Okay.
their 1
So that is the
They would have a
0.75.
40.35 square foot side. So that would.
7 square feet over.
Yeah.
it's how many?
Okay.
That's not a,
But that's not a lot,
that's
really.
not a lot when you spread it out over that
I guess
sign.
that's where I'm
nothing.
coming
You
from,
wouldn't know
and
the
just
difference.
thinking about these signs is, I always look at it from a kind of a common sense perspective.
Mark,
The-
can you go back to the slide that had the other ones on it, though?
Oh, yeah.
And those are in cities, and some of those are larger than, well, I don't know how big those buildings are.
Well, the Foundry's I mean, it's a very tall building, but the Kukinova there looks to be a two-story.
With an additional.
Well, and these are facing
And those are in
these are facing
pedestrian
the
areas.
public street, too.
I mean, I
That
wonder if
one's
that
my
would,
shop.
would something like Super Chicks, if all of a sudden you had the Super Chicks sign and then you did the what's chicken and custard? And you had the chicken and custard separate like they did on where we're pronouncing it, Kukinova?
Oh,
See how
yeah.
they have it on the what does it say, artisan pizza?
Yeah, artisan
Where
pizza.
all of a sudden you're not getting that much, you're not getting a big mass sign right there on the canopy. Well, I mean, I'm trying not to make it more complicated than it already is. What I'm really trying to do is I want to make it easy for the staff to interpret and for the sign designer, the graphic designer, or the architect to be able to submit something that complies, and they when they read the language of the ordinance, they go, okay, I know what that means, and I know the box that I need to fit
Well,
in.
the ratio to the width would be the easiest, in my opinion.
That's what you're used to
Because we're
using.
used to it, it makes sense, people understand it. And to me, I just,
Basically, you're saying if you take a rectangle and put it around the Super Chicks arch, including the chicken and custard, it's, as is proposed, is
But if it
47
was
square
only
feet. Okay.
this,
Yeah.
they don't have to be teeny tiny.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking is, do we,
In a lot of instances, people's signs tend to be more rectangular because they can get onto avoiding windows and walls and things like that. These signs are going to be hanging in space. So again, one of the reasons we were looking at a maximum, letter height or height of letters, and you said this is sort of identifying the entrance to walking up to the building and into the building.
I think,
Someone could, going back to Super Chicks, there's no parameter by going just, you get X amount of square feet, per,
Per tenant.
yeah, or per the size of the building from.
it's true, you could have,
They could make that sign instead of being, they could make it much taller.
yeah,
50 blocks.
and be within the square footage.
Scale, and people would do that to attract attention.
I think what,
So, our concern was a lot of times putting a sign on the side of the building kind of limits the shape to a certain amount, and you don't get a lot of very square signs or signs that are taller than they are wide. But in this type of application, you could easily.
let me ask, is there a possibility of thinking about it in two different ways? Percentage, whatever it is, 0.75 is on that, what would you guys
And then
be
a
saying?
max letter height, yeah.
or ratio.
Or related to this, the height of the building, a scale related to the height of the building. So that, because this is a two-story building, it can carry that sign better than a one-story building possibly could. But if somebody wants a canopy and they have a one-story building, how do you want that to look? It's going to have a different application. And there are one-stories allowed in the town
Yeah.
center for smaller.
You could tie it to the overall height of the portion of the building that the sign was in front of.
Yes.
Because in this case, this section of the building A is a little shorter than a couple other sections.
but I think the
Using the height that way, because someone could come and do a Tennessee theater that has a long, and it may have very similar square footage, but it's 30 feet tall.
Well, when we did the MUTC years ago, I mean, that was kind of the type of signs that we envisioned for the pedestrian access areas, where these kind of tall, skinny signs that were kind of mounted on a 90-degree angle to the
Right.
building. And so obviously in this scenario with the canopy, you don't have the opportunity to do that. And we don't want to pigeonhole your marketing efforts to your tenants, where tenants says, well, that doesn't fit anything that I want to do. So I kind of like where we're going. I mean, my best guess is, maybe that's a 30-foot tall building. The gray section might be more like 34, 35 feet tall. I mean, if normally you're probably like a 15-foot floor to floor plus whatever the kind of the phantom second-story space is. And maybe we could, if there was a ratio, if it was 10% of the total overall height, again, that would probably limit you to a 3-foot sign on a 30-foot tall building. And I don't know if we're getting off into the weeds and making it too complicated for staff, but
Well,
I do think.
Bart makes a good point. Just applying the ratio is not, you might end up with a sign that's out of scale just because they've arranged it in a vertical manner or something.
The problem I have is, when I'm visually looking at that, we're looking at a curved sign, okay? And the eye captures that as something, bigger. If you were to if you were just flatten that sign and make it those same size letters, you'd be overwhelmed.
I don't think so.
I mean, it stretched from all the way across that canopy. You collapsed it down to a flat,
Well,
instead of an arc.
I don't think we should try to overthink this.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
we're
You know,
I'm
I
trying to
mean,
overthink
here,
it.
how
I'm trying to
about-
point out the fact that that's.
We've got a ratio here, was it 0.75? That seems
the
to be
pedestrian.
practical.
Side of the,
Now, maybe we need a ratio of height to width to kind of box in so we don't have a 30-foot sign, or
Generic point
some
I'm
max
making-
limit.
The generic point I'm making is, not everybody's going to have a curved sign, so we need to think in terms of a generic way to deal with a canopy sign, not just something that Super Chicks has. Okay?
Right, yeah,
But I think that's overthinking it. When you walk
I don't
into the
think it's
parking lot, you look at those signs, you're thinking about whether it's curved or straight, you know, I mean.
Well, I'm just
I
saying
just
that
think
we're
we're
right now
overthinking it.
discussing
I think we're
everything relative to
overthinking
a
it.
curved Super Chick sign, not a generic canopy sign.
And quite
Well, I'm
frankly,
looking at it as a rectangle.
I am
I
too.
would draw a rectangle around that, and then that kind of tells you your height.
well,
what
and
we're gonna have to
that's a
look
common
at.
practice
Scale.
that the
Not
staff
everybody's
has
gonna have a
used for
curved
many
sign.
years. If they have an unusually shaped sign, they draw a box around it, and there's length times width
Exactly.
right there.
Exactly.
Quite frankly, when I look at the arch, I think that either they're probably getting penalized a little bit and having to take a little more square footage than they would otherwise need, but that's part of their corporate identity, and I'm okay with that.
Sure.
It changes things up a little bit.
I don't have a problem with
Yeah.
the arch or anything like that.
One thought, I think somebody touched on it, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think one of the things, the first thing we're talking about is a need for a text amendment to even allow canopy signs, is that correct?
I think we support that. I don't think we've heard
Yeah,
anybody that does not support that.
Maybe
That's step
write
one.
this so that it applies only to canopy signs and it doesn't get lumped into.
Wall signs?
Wall signs.
I mean, I think that's our intent tonight, is what we're
Yeah.
talking about is specific to canopy signs. Is that correct? Or do you want to talk about, are we going to force feed the wall signs with the same?
No, I
same
think,
parameters?
no, we're just talking about the provision to have a canopy sign as an option, as an alternative to a wall sign. Like you said, it's not both, it's either or. So if someone chooses this,
But it wouldn't affect their eligibility for a wall sign like facing Kingston Pike. Like
No,
Super
they
Chick.
already got one
They have
approved.
another sign on the.
they
on the
already
other
have
side of
that
the
one
building.
approved, actually. They're probably making that one
Yeah,
as we speak.
one-to-one on this particular entrance right here would be overkill.
So
The
you're
what
saying-
now?
Mayor's saying it's too big.
Yeah.
1-to-1's too big in this scenario.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I
that's because
agree.
they have more spots. If they only have, how many of those spots, is that the whole thing, is the Super Chicks building?
Three of them.
Goes over,
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
right.
it's
yeah.
all this, is theirs.
I guess, you know,
Those
what would be
three.
kind of interesting, and what I don't want to do is delay the applicant or the tenant, but if we pulled it back to a .75 and shaved off 7 square feet off of this, what would it look like? And maybe that's something that the staff could circulate to the planning commission, and that way, try to get some feedback, and we're not holding this thing up.
You can see what that looked like.
And see what a
with the
.75
curve,
looks
But you
like.
also can look at that as, okay, it's going to, the next building down on the end, there's going to have one that's split.
Yeah, that's what I started off with, and I totally agree. It's just personal taste, right? But I think slightly smaller would be better.
Well, the other concern is, what if that was just?
One
Super-
single, right.
Super Chicks was
Right.
just one single.
It'd
and
be
you're
teeny
limited
tiny
to
little sign.
.75, and it would be like, why bother?
Right.
So that's my question is,
Well,
do
but it's
do
on
we
the
have the
pedestrian
either
side of
or?
the building, though. I mean, you
Yeah,
don't
we're-
need a,
we're just
you don't
focused on
need
the
a big
pedestrian
sign.
side of the building.
Yes, I understand that, but
Yeah.
still, if you want to have a sign there and they only have one bay, they're not, it's going to look ridiculous.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying if Super Chicks was just a little, whatever, 1,500 square foot
Yeah.
restaurant, then all of a sudden they would have this little dinky sign up there.
Because you're
Based
related.
upon they would only have 20, let's say the bay is 24 feet. Then all of a sudden they would only have a little 24 square foot sign.
A good example would be that third one over, if that was the only one they had, and that was it, if that's the only space they had,
And they want to have a canopy.
and they want a canopy, then
So the question is, do you want to make an accommodation for the second floor, like, to include it?
Well, mine
And the-
is thinking you can either do the .75 or, like I said, or relate it to the scale of the height of the building, the scale of the building, as you're limiting.
The
because
letter height, maybe the max
you're
letter
right, you
height.
end up with a very different, if you have Super Chicks that size, and you put like a tinier sign there, that's gonna look kind of silly.
Yep, it's going to look
And
goofy.
you want it, aesthetically, you want them to look certainly similar in scale. So you've got to have a different way of calculating that, if that's indeed what you want to have for canopy signs. And not have them look, I mean, people can make fun of it, but it does look, the Anytime Fitness sign looks much larger than the rest of the signs, way larger, because we were allowed to, and
Because you had a lot of
We didn't get our
spaces, yeah.
purple, so we were gonna make that sign as big as we could make it. But it's out of scale, that's fine in a strip mall, driving down the highway, but not so much in your town center.
We will have one more staff developer meeting, right, before the next.
Well, I mean, we're trying to get some clarity on, so we can start developing some language too tonight. But we'll talk about it, yes, we will.
Commissioner Myers
like a-
said,
Yeah.
and first of all, I have to speak.
Best practices, and there's gotta be other
We have to have this
places that are written.
exact sign
Some
height,
ordinances
everything.
for
I don't think
canopies,
we'll say
right?
that. So what, I would think it would be extremely easy for the architect on the computer to trim that down so it's 40 square feet, right? 40.85 square feet, and let's just bring it to you and let you look at it.
And that's,
Okay,
Mark,
fine,
we-
let's say you're right.
I mean, that's, to me, about a 20%, that's about a 20% reduction in the overall size, and my instinct is, that's actually gonna look pretty good. That's gonna be more in scale with the rest of the building by
And that's where I'm.
cutting about 20% of the size of that out.
I just can't promise I won't be back here still fighting because
Right.
supervisor says we have to have.
Right.
It is what it is. We'll go
So
through
how
it.
does that translate to that bay on the left-hand side? So that's all you all need to be thinking about, because if they come back and want to have a canopy as well, and you're restricting it based on the.
They don't have a canopy, they don't have
It
a
would be hard
structure.
to, it'd be hard to retro, because of the way the sidewalks are designed, it'd
They-
be hard
look
for
at
somebody
this
to come
picture
back
here.
in with a permanent canopy. Yeah.
But
But what
if
if
they
there-
had redesigned
right.
the building differently so
Right.
that there was a
Right.
canopy, we have to consider that in this, because this may not have a canopy, but
Would
one of
be
the other buildings might.
0.75 to 1. I mean, it'd just be,
Bring two below honeys.
Well, and we may not, this is something new for us.
no.
Right.
Water company soup chips made out of concrete, honey, and we can't constantly, every time a business wants something that are still permitted.
But
That's
this
the
is not
point,
about
yeah.
a business wanting that. This is about what does this look like?
Right.
And so if we're limiting the size, that's why I'm going back to scale and proportionality.
What if they're all just the exact same square footage?
Well, I mean, that's what Noah does at Renaissance, and it works fine. I was thinking
Yeah.
of the same thing, but that way you got, everybody's got consistency.
So it doesn't matter if it's one bay
It
or
doesn't
three
matter if
bays,
you're a
they're the
little
exact
tenant or a
same.
big tenant, but
Right.
I think with the canopies, I like these canopy letters, especially, freestanding letters.
Yep, me too.
Ours have more of a, I think in the sign industry, they call it a can. A can with the letters then apply to the can, and all the cans are the same size. I think a can would look terrible up there on the canopy, so I think you need the individual letters. I think that's real classy. I think that emulates a downtown of what we're going after. One thing I can guarantee is, no matter what language that we try to foreshadow that we're gonna need, there's gonna be a tenant that Bud's gonna bring back to us that we say, oh, we never thought of that. And that's okay, because this is something new that we've not, we're delighted we're dealing with this. Because there's a lot of us that kind of dreamed about having a town center someday, and we're finally getting to it. And I'm okay looking at it. Obviously, we're gonna try to do at the best one size fits all, but it's not gonna happen. There's gonna be somebody else that we're saying, oh, that's a great idea, we never thought of that.
If you tie it to the pedestrian side, just keep in mind that the businesses that will face the main street that goes in, all that's a pedestrian environment. So all those signs would be 0.75 to 1 that face
Right.
that main street.
Right.
But again, to me, it's the pedestrian, it should be pedestrian scale. You're off a major arterial, you're not going fast down this street. It's a short street.
Well,
Bud, I got a question for you. That unit on the far left, it's not going to be a canopy, but there's an awning. Where's their sign going to be?
Their sign would be,
and maybe that would be a candidate for a taller, skinnier sign. So that's why I
It
hate to
would.
say, well, you just can't go over 3 feet no matter what.
Yeah, they could possibly put something here, and it would look kind of neat.
Yeah, it'd look
Like a
cool, for
vertical
sure.
sign.
Yeah, especially if it was like reverse lit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Well, that's it. That scenario,
That's a wall sign, not a canopy
that
sign.
6 foot tall sign
Right.
actually may look pretty
Even if
darn
it's-
good right there.
Right, if it sticks out, it's not a
we've
canopy
got
sign.
some of those, I don't know whether they're called blade signs, but.
Yeah.
At University Commons.
Well, if blade sign is kind of what at least I envisioned in the town center, But by the time the architect starts, designing cool canopies and awnings, we come up with some other needs. So I do struggle saying, hey, you just can't be over 3 feet no matter what, because there might be somebody might really come up with a cool, tall, skinny design on that far left bay over there.
Right.
Might be a wall
Okay,
sign.
well, it'd be just a wall sign, okay.
Maybe right here.
But they may not have any kind of logo that would fit like that. I mean, they're completely redesigning their logo. Right, and it's not over their entrance, that's true.
We run into that all the time with people, have fairly elaborate corporate logos and, they can't fit them within the parameters of the design.
Right.
And there is that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have it where it accommodates everybody's
Right.
logo layout that they prefer to have. And some of them have, large mountains of, wooden boxes on that creates a problem. So sometimes they have to modify that if they need to fit within the space.
Let's try the .75 on the canopy. Let's kind of focus on canopies, because that's kind of real where the request is tonight, is with canopy and I think some monument signage. And then if we have to come back and address something we hadn't envisioned with wall signs, then we'll just have to address it, I thought. I mean, that's,
Let me ask you a question, and I'm gonna throw a real curveball, I'll start to you at all.
okay.
Ask Mark this question. Somebody said, we, especially Bart, I appreciate the fact that if you can't just do this for my project, this is for the whole MUTC
Mhm.
zone. So there's zones, there's planned commercial zones, there's zones where, different things that they use on review, where you basically, come show us and we'll decide whether we approve it or not. And there's certain things that you can and can't do, or the planning commission would have discretion, say in a planned commercial district. Is there a way to do the ordinance, a text change to the ordinance that in the MUTC zone, that it gives either what's the design review board, what visual resources review board, or some board, or your commission, the leeway in that zone to take these on a case-by-case basis? It's just a thought, because then you're charged, and if I come here and I say, gosh, I want that, and this whole board says, sorry, you're getting 40.3 feet, period, and that's it, so you still have the teeth, but you also have the leeway that if something comes and you say, wow, that looks really good, we're so tired, we don't want to do another text edition.
Well, I for one, I'd like to let the VRB deal mostly with signs. We try to deal with the text side of things. The last thing I want to do is start adding all signs, even in the MUTC, to our agenda. I struggle with putting too much subjectivity. I like the objectivity. So some of the planned commercial districts that we've done in the town of Farragut, we kind of regret having some of the flexibility that we put in there, because we didn't really get what we thought we were getting, even though on paper they built what we thought we were going to get. But when we start looking at it, we're like, okay, that's not exactly what we had in mind. And the consistency is the other problem that I have with that, is that, one planning commission says yes, and then, with some of us that come and go off the planning commission, and then another planning commission, then you have somebody that comes into the town of Farragut and says, well, my neighbor has this, how come I can't get this? Granted, that happens all the time when we change the rules, but I understand that philosophically these planned areas make a lot of sense, because you think everybody's going to make consistent decisions. The problem is we don't always make consistent decisions. So I think that the more metrics that we can put into it, again, if we do something and you have a tenant and it just doesn't fit, you just got to come back to us and say, hey, this is the reason why you should change the ordinance because of this. And then we'll say, okay, we'll change it for the entire MUTC.
That's fair.
So Mark, you've heard all of our precautions and recommendations, and can you cobble something together? And
Do you have any guidance about what we're talking about?
The simplest thing to do would just be to say if it's pedestrian facing, then it's .75 to 1, and then just let we'll see what happens with
And
that.
focus on
I
the
agree with
canopies, we're not
Bart.
gonna change anything with
The
walls.
letter height is also,
It's also
somebody
to
could
have a-
abuse
have
that,
a look at it.
and
And
that's
I'm okay-
true.
Maybe we don't put anything with letters in there. Maybe
Yeah,
we just-
I don't think
I'm
we
sorry, the
should.
letter height. Maybe we don't focus on the height. We just focus on the .75.
I mean, we may get somebody that ends up abusing that.
I can't
that
see
could
why somebody would
happen.
put a tall skinny
I don't
one on a
understand why they
canopy,
would do that either on a canopy. And then,
Well, if you get a word like Tupelo honey, it's a longer word, so, compared to Super Chicks.
Well, my next thing is Taos hot dogs.
the value of the .75,
This may sound absolutely ridiculous,
I'd like that
but is there a consortium of people across the state or around the southeast that are in your position, Mark, that you communicate with? I mean, there's got to be somebody somewhere that has a canopy sign ordinance that's already dealt with this, gone through this process. They may have exactly what we need already on their books somewhere.
yeah, we can look at that too. That's
It's just a thought.
yeah, no, absolutely. We do that. We try. I always like to borrow from others.
Okay, right, sure.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think Bud is a good point there, is that we can't regulate the message on the sign.
True. That's true.
And instead of write out the words, appreciate for people in hunting, they can come in if they were hot dogs and put a giant hot dog in the robot. And if it's just the area or if it was a curly mustard place, a ice cream cone, it could just be nothing on the front there. And again,
Are you talking about a wall or a canopy, Bart? Okay, now so I think we need to be focusing on individual letters. So, I mean, for me, I think like all the photos that we saw of other
Right.
downtown signs, they were individual letters.
Yeah.
Now, I'm okay with putting the chicken and the custard on the fascia, but as far as I don't think we ought to, it kind of goes back to the can. You don't want any kind of big can of something up there. I think we need to restrict it to letters.
I notice every one of his items here, A through F, they all say lettering, so it's
TripAdvisor
That's kind of a
had,
hint.
like their.
Well, that's true. I am personally would be opposed to a backer board
Okay, that's good to
for
know.
canopy signs.
Yeah, it's tacky.
Yep, agreed.
We need to put that in there.
Yeah.
No backer business.
See, that's good.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Bart?
I just wondered if it would be restricted to largely text or just, minor logos. I could see somebody come in with
With something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
not everyone's sign is 3 words long, some more, logos or smaller, capitalize on the area of the sign.
So if we focus on letters only, then that wouldn't be allowed.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, unless we do something with the
yeah, that don't get it.
I'm glad you and Mark have to write this, not us. You get to wordsmith this. Mm-hmm.
Right now, we allow cabinet signs at all. And then another thing that you need to think about is the lighting, because we only allow halo lighting or external lighting, not lit.
But not internally illuminated.
Right.
Well, I think in a canopy light, I think it's,
Actually,
yeah, I think you gotta light it. I mean,
actually, you can light them.
you could, I guess you could do it kind of
You can do
reverse
it.
backlit
Yeah,
like that.
we've got a number of examples of where they are lit the way that.
Goes, yeah.
For each letter, so that would be different than having it full that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so, I mean, they can light them the way that we require wall lights to be lit right now in the town center. And it does create, to me, the lighting really is super important on
well, I mean,
signs.
you're gonna have street lighting there. You're gonna have quite a bit of street lighting that
Because when you drive by 35 North and the Farragut gateway, those signs look classier.
They
have a
look- they do
classier,
look
like
classy.
Renaissance too.
Yeah.
Those signs just, they complement the building, and then they also kind of separate that project from its surroundings.
Yeah,
So
one from the other, yeah.
I think you can light these canopy signs the way that we require. In fact, we got plenty of examples that show that you can.
So I thought we had discussed if it was a canopy, like, I keep going back, I think Cucinoga was good. So that cannot be internally lit?
It would just be, it would be backlit, reverse lit, or halo lit, just like this sign.
I mean, I think the Cucanova, I kind of, if that's, I assume I'm pronouncing. Again, I don't know if those are internally lit. It seems like those would be a good candidate for, very subtle internal illumination.
I don't have a problem with internal illumination for the canopy
The
sign.
individual letters on the canopy, I think we have our own, I think it's on the national, whatever it's called, historical thing, it's JFG sign.
Yeah.
Everybody goes crazy if you think about moving the JFG sign. JFG sign's a large scale version of what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
internally
If I'm not
illuminated.
mistaken, it's internally lit. So it has precedent for a downtown setting, and that's just, I just don't want to I don't want to do this whole thing and then end up and it's just a shopping center. Exactly, my whole career has been built to do a shopping center. But somehow, if we get this right, signage is going to be just as important, if not more important than the rest of the architecture. Get it right. If we get it wrong by a little bit, it's going to mess the whole thing up.
Yeah, there's a good example right there.
Well, I think that probably has a little backer that's reverse lit.
Yeah, it is. That would be
Obviously,
compliant.
that's real classy too.
Go back one.
That would be compliant with what we do with wall
I-
signs.
Go ahead. One more. That looks like that's internally lit.
So it's upright.
Is that uplighting?
Yes.
My guess is, that's, all those are reversed, right?
Yeah.
That's like rear lighting.
Yeah, that's not very,
I don't think that's real legible.
no,
I don't like
it's not.
Well, it's kind of Art Deco, right? That's why.
Well, it's up to you all. We're just presenting information. I mean,
I don't know why we wouldn't consider internally lit for canopy signs only. I mean, this is a different sign.
Individual letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Individually, the individual letters internally lit, not,
a large back.
not a big, yeah. I mean, that's got to be spelled out, but I don't know why we would have a problem with that, given that it's a canopy sign, not a wall sign.
well,
Would you feel comfortable with that, Bud?
I mean, my only thought on it is that we don't allow it on any of the other signs in the city center, and that's what lighting thing.
Many years ago.
I understand that, but we
This is just changing.
never had canopy signs before.
No.
And I think, to me, again, I don't want to harp on it, but there's a fine line between having consistency and having just everything all of a sudden, this town didn't grow up organically. And for the most part, I've always done more consistent, and we have to have some consistency, but I want to be able to have
Some variety.
Some character.
some variety. I
Sure.
mean, just like somebody said, if somebody came on that building and did a vertical sign on that piece, it probably would look good. Maybe change it up, and it's not homogeneous, but maybe.
so for canopy signs only, you're open to the internal illumination. Is that
For
what we're
letter,
hearing?
not,
For the letter,
Yeah.
individual letters.
Can't do a can on a can.
Okay, I have another thing. So you could, like where they have the awnings on Super Six, they could potentially change those to canopies instead of being an awning. Would you be okay with them doing that, having a facelit sign on everyone? Like if every single one had a canopy?
Oh, you're saying instead of like a canvas style canopy, they were actually more permanent
I would limit
awnings?
them to one sign,
Yeah, you just have the one signs all
the
you're
one
allowed.
canopy sign.
Whether it's
But if they have enough square
can-
footage, they could potentially stretch it across all of them.
Well, I mean, they would have,
Cross that
we
bridge
just,
when we
you can only have one canopy sign or one wall sign.
Well, unless you front a public street and I mean, there's
Yeah, and
the
it
other
physically
language like with
fits.
Super Chicks, but yeah.
Well, I think the language that says,
Again, I don't think
Yeah, that would
we're
be
gonna
one
solve
sign,
all this.
technically.
but the language talks about.
We can come up with the best
Entrance
written
area.
plan,
Yeah.
and we're still gonna miss
It's
something.
got to include
Yeah.
the other.
Good discussion.
But in that particular one, it's over the entrance, and that's, we want to make sure that what canopy sign we're putting in is over, a canopy over the entrance.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, we said that, right? Didn't we
Yes.
say that?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Draft something and see what we can.
What she was saying is that the tenant on the left took their awning off and did a, a steel, more permanent structure, whether it's cantilevered or it has a post on it, and it would then became a canopy instead of an awning, then would they be eligible? My thought is, yeah, they would
Yes.
be eligible for the same.
Then do you want every single place to be allowed to have one? They create those, you'll have income of every single building.
But there's,
My thought is they're probably not gonna, they're probably past the point of no return to start redesigning these buildings and incorporating, because most of the canopies would all have to be incorporated before the brick masonry's put on, and
There's a chance still on the two buildings that we're reserving for the Wright restaurants back by the park, that someone could want to come with a little bit more of a wholesale. We're not going to be able to do wholesale changes at this point, period.
Right.
A little bit more than just a minor. But someone did bring up a good point, is where's the sign going to go? And if it has to go vertical, if we have somebody that says we can do vertical, then they're going to want to put it on the awning.
Well, they'll be able to put a sign on the Kingston Pike face. And then back here, you should know where you're at. This is, you're back in the parking lot. So a sign,
You don't have street presence.
a vertical sign on this right there would look really classy and cool to me.
I think so too.
I'm just saying that the tenants who are actually wanting to operate this.
Well, they just need to understand that's what
They're not going to necessarily look at it by saying that this is only pedestrians and everybody's going to know where they are. They're going to say no, they're going to drive back down Kingston Pike at 50, and then they're going to stop, and then they're going to come in, and they're going to say,
Turn in on two
where's the
wheels.
super chicks place I can figure it out? They're still going to need a sign.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm not
And we're fine
against
with that.
the sign.
We're not
Yeah.
taking that away from anybody.
I'm just trying to proportion it to its context is really all I'm trying to do.
Ollie, back to you. If there's 3 bays, if you put 2 canopies over the 2 middle ones, it's not over an entrance.
No, we don't want it on the awnings.
So the sign can only be over the entrance, right?
Part of that is also the building, the builder gets to decide where canopies go.
That's right.
Well, for sake of time, why don't we just
We have-
go with the .75?
Okay.
And let's see what that looks like with Super Chick.
I agree.
And then I guess the individual letters themselves could be internally illuminated or the other types of illumination. Does that sound?
I think
All
plenty
right.
of people choose to do it other ways. I mean,
Letters
some of those
only.
other
Yeah,
ways to light
letters
signs
only.
looked
You got
great.
that?
I think a mix of both.
Yeah, but yeah, be sharp.
I do too. I think there, a little bit of eclecticness, if that's even the right word, is actually a good thing for a downtown district.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
for
I
sure.
totally agree. I don't want homogeneity. Sorry, couldn't say that. Yeah, I'd like for it to have some variety to it and not look sterile like Bud said, but you also don't want something that's just going to be completely out of place either. So it's kind of a little bit of a fine line there.
All right, let's talk about monument signs.
You're going to have internal.
Well, one other thing dealing with the colors.
Oh,
I need to get your all's feedback on the sign colors, awning colors, and things like that. I think we've already talked a little bit in the past about awning colors, but with the sign colors, I think what the applicant's proposing is that the letters, the main letters themselves, not the subtext, would be white. I think what staff has provided for in some of the shopping centers in the town is white, black, or like a aluminum or silver, those kind of colors, or they're not really colors, but that kind of range of look. So do we want to hold the main letters themselves on the signs to that? Because that's what we require right now is consistency in terms of style, color, and illumination. Not identity, and not being identical, but just
Right.
consistent.
personally, I think
You're going to have
for,
internal
corporate colors?
illumination. You're going to have internal illumination. You got to rethink what.
Well, it would only be for the canopy sign,
That's what I'm saying.
individual letters.
We're still under canopy, and you're talking about white, black, silver / gray / natural.
Yeah.
That envisions metal.
Mhm.
If it's internally illuminated,
Yeah.
that's a different proposition, so the wording needs to reflect something like that. And also the fact that it's gonna be lit up, and you don't want it to be blinking either.
Oh, yeah, right.
We don't allow blinking, period.
So the colors, that's a good range of color for you all.
So does that affect the words chicken and custard?
Well, what we've done in the past on logos and subtext is we've let the corporate logos and colors kind of come into play on those. So it's kind of been a compromise. We still achieve the overall goal of the compatibility, but we give the businesses some flexibility to have their own colors. Even on the main signs, they can still do the curved letters and their font and all that. That's not a problem. But the color itself, if that's what you all, if I'm hearing, the white, black, and the silver is what we would go with the main letters. Okay.
We're good with that.
That's what y'all are proposing, I think.
Subtext or a logo
Yeah.
can have the color.
I agree.
The letters be white, and you do know I will be eating these words sometime in the next few months for lots of insisting upon having blue letters. Right now, we agree consistency with the letters, whether that be on a wall sign or on the canopy sign, be white, and then the smaller subtext or logo. In this case, an awning.
The other thing, on the awnings, because we're going to run into this and potentially in the town center and other places, is, are you all comfortable with just a solid color, but have it in the adopted color palette that we have in our architectural design standard? Is pretty broad. For accent colors, it's got all kinds of different shades of colors. Or if y'all are not really hung up on the color of awnings. What we're trying to avoid is somebody doesn't put out a striped pink awning that looks completely out of character and detracts from the overall
Can we
building.
just stick to solid colored awnings then? Just say solid colored
Yeah,
awnings. so we don't end
solid.
up-
Stripes or
Yeah.
Right.
Is
Try to
that a
avoid the
problem,
stripes.
having solid colored awnings? I'm not a big stickler on color because I know that.
They're not really worried about the color, is that what
And
you're
you're okay
saying?
with if somebody picks a pink or a purple or?
I am because we couldn't get our purple in Anytime Fitness, as you know, 10 years down the line. I'm still a little bitter about that, but
It's not in the color palette.
it was,
But the yellow's not in our color palette either.
Well, we could have some,
A yellow on there, it's not that color.
yeah.
part of architecture design review, building.
With the yellow.
yeah.
Yeah, about 4 months, it'll be our color yellow anyway.
Yeah.
It's gonna fade. Different between Tennessee orange and Texas orange.
But you're going to get that with signage anyway. I don't disagree with you. I like a consistency, but you also have that in a downtown thing where
Yep.
people do their own thing
Yep.
because it's their building, and
So solid color for awnings?
I think I think it
Not-
would save.
not-
save it just
And
be
not
solid.
stay within our
I would
color wheel.
recommend we stay within our adopted color
so, too.
palette. It's very broad if you look
is
at
real
it.
broad.
It's extremely broad. If somebody can't find a color in that or something very comparable,
And what's good is it does eliminate some of the concerns about maybe some fluorescence and.
yeah,
kind of
something
some-
that really is,
Some blinding colors that we
Right.
would not want. I mean, I'd like to stay with those, that, we'll call it the color wheel or color chart, whatever it is.
yeah.
And my only question about that is there are certain tenants, especially if they're multi-branch, that have their own, what's the number?
Yeah, the-
Canteen number, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's our number, it's just like Coke says, this is the formula.
Yeah.
It's
I think-
lock and key,
but I think-
we're okay with that.
We need to
Yeah.
get off the specific Pantene numbers for our.
Well, we need to have
color
the language
thing.
say
Yeah, we
It's
do.
in the
Or
general
we-
fabric.
That number thing is
comparable.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
maybe we get rid of the specific Pantene numbers and just stick to a basic.
Yeah, and have
like you
something that,
said,
or
related.
comparable,
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
because.
And let the VRB kind of work through that.
Yeah,
Okay, VRB should. be.
Well, no, actually, VRB wouldn't deal with the awnings. That'd be more of a planning commission thing. Right.
Yeah, that's true.
You can send it to VRB.
Yeah.
Six or half a dozen, I mean.
Yeah, I think taking the number reference out in that way, give them flexibility.
Let Russ up here, you guys.
Yeah. Okay, we think we got enough information to move forward with that? Kind of what we're saying is, what I think Louise said, and also I would support is, give them a little bit of flexibility so they're not having to hit those exact,
Right,
what are
yeah.
the color codes, but generally stay in that family, those families of colors.
Okay. All right, I think we finished with that. Let's go to the
That way
monument
we
sign.
don't have a duplicate VCR store we used to have.
So the monument sign is one of the amendment requests.
Right there,
And
Wendy's.
Oh, yeah. What was it? It was supposed to be red.
it was dealing with the colors and compatibility of the, which I think we've already talked
It's
about.
the fertility clinic now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hollywood Video.
Yeah. The monument sign, in this case, what they're looking at is having some entrance signage as you come in off of Kingston Pike. And y'all have kind of looked at this in the past. The sign that's on the west side of the entrance, this is the east side, but the one on the other side of Biddle Farms Boulevard is within 150 feet of the Aldi sign, so they have to be 150 feet apart. And so that's an issue with the sign that would match this on the other side of the entrance coming in. We looked at this and I've talked with Bud about this. To me, just me personally, and that doesn't mean anything, these buildings on the corner are the iconic elements, and I don't know that, to me, this kind of looks like it could potentially detract from the buildings because of its scale, at least as it appears in this image. So one thing we talked about at the staff developer meeting was maybe trying to create a board that was comparable in size to this base where the sign would be put on, and just see what that looks like in relation to the building on each side of the road coming in. Because you don't want something that kind of overwhelms the buildings. To me, the buildings speak for themselves. I think they're very attractive. They have iconic elements on them. There is no requirement really for an iconic element at the entrance. It's the buildings themselves that have to be iconic. So if I think the commission and the board want to move in the direction of providing for entrance signage, then maybe a way to deal with that would be to treat it similar to what we do with residential subdivisions. As you're kind of coming into subdivisions, and a lot of times they'll have these entrance elements on each side with small signs on each entrance element. And if that's the case, then the question becomes: is it one that would only be allowed at one entrance point, or at each entrance point, like it is right now with residential subdivisions? And you could kind of end up with a bunch of these. Another thing I mentioned at the staff developer meeting is these buildings are under construction right now. To me, it seems like maybe it would be good to finish them out and see how they get used and figure out what would fit in that, if anything, would fit in there and look right and be appropriate to the context. And that's just a suggestion that we mentioned at the staff developer meeting. I would be concerned about having entrance signage that may in some fashion take away from the buildings on the corner, because I think those buildings are going to be very nice looking buildings, because you can already see they're bricked, and they're coming together pretty far along. So
Why don't we ask Bud, because you guys were going to look at that, weren't you? You were going to do a board.
We had, if I recall, Commissioner Myers in one of the previous meetings asked why we needed that at all. That iconic element's gone all over the board, from the Twin Eiffel Towers in the beginning to this. I can say that then the question was to do a mock-up. Now that the buildings are up, it's still plywood mock-up to judge the scale.
The identifier for the,
It could be a vertical, it could be Middle Farms at Farragut Town Center. So, I don't know.
I think that's a great
I
idea.
don't want to require myself to do that. I'm finding myself now, I'll just be honest with you, what I would like is the ability to do something and come back to this board, but I also would like the ability to not have to do that, not be required.
I would prefer it not exist for sure.
I think it stands on its own, that just the same way I felt whenever talked about, a couple of years ago when we talked about the entrance signs. I don't think you need them. I don't see the purpose in it. For marketing efforts, I'm not sure what it's doing for you. I think your ability to lease your tenant spaces are going to stand on its own, and, driving traffic, I don't necessarily think they're going to drive any traffic. I am not a marketing guru by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm flexible. I mean, I'm kind of.
I like the idea, even though now I find myself leaning towards the people who don't want it. I still like the idea. It's just like, if you live in a subdivision, you got a nice entrance to it, you don't need that entrance to tell you where to turn every evening coming home from work, but it's still nice,
But people are looking for that subdivision, you see that sign, I know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we've got an entrance, it's kind of a divided boulevard, so it's a natural place to put a, kind of sign there that's very architectural and plantings in front of it and what have you. So I think it's an identifier, but do you have some commitment at all to the Biddles to have to put their name on?
I'm going to be surprised at this. It surprised me that Mr. Biddle actually kind of got upset when we named the Biddle Farms.
Really?
Yeah. Probably, speaking out of school, I think he was more partial to the mother side of the family.
Moser? Yeah.
Yeah.
Other side, but that's my conjecture.
So without that.
So I agree, Mark, with your assessment that this does take away from this building. I mean, the simplicity, when you're driving up, with these buildings coming up, when you drive up, I'm not sure that everyone's aware that we are working through a wayfinding signage package with our tourism. And when we get to the town center, there's going to be signage that directs you to the Biddle Farm Town Center project. I kind of like the idea of maybe just like you mentioned, a vertical sign maybe on building or a vertical sign. I think we need to have something in our ordinance to allow for like a subdivision like this signage, because this is not the only project that we're dealing with. But I don't know that we need to solve it tonight, but I think we might still want to consider this. The Ford property is going to develop. We may want to see signage for Village Green may someday want to do their signage differently. What does that look like? And I don't know.
I kind of feel like what Louise is saying with this, Bud presented us with entrance signs to this many years ago, and I don't want to take those away from him, because we've kind of led him to believe, hey, we're okay with it, but we don't really, at least me, I don't really think you need it, but I'm okay with it. So if he needs a 10-foot variance to adjust the space between the signs, I'm okay with that. If we need to do a text amendment, I'm okay with that too. I would encourage him to just take a long, hard look at it and determine, hey, do I really need these? It's, not necessarily the financial side of it, just, do I really need it?
Yeah.
Is this really how a organic downtown would be built with this? And is there other ways, if you do want to identify this particular downtown district, maybe there's other ways to do it. So I guess I'm kind of ambivalent. You kind of know how I feel. I don't think you need it, but if you feel like you got to have it, I would support it.
I'd like to bring you to attention that we had a meeting yesterday on the wayfinding, and they're getting ready to put together some material to present to us in 30 days, and we were going to bring you into it because we're looking at different areas of our community. Farragut Station would be the top golf area. Little Farm development would be another area. So we're looking, or they are looking to tell us how we should designate our signing in different areas of our town. So we need to get you involved with that as well.
And I'm happy to. I guess my request tonight would be to, I think I agree with Vice Mayor, just my personal opinion, probably would be, make sense to come up with a text amendment allowing for something similar to this. My request would be to not require me to do this. I'm still going to keep exploring because I literally had not even thought of the idea of what the smaller sign actually on the building would look like. We can get something pulled up and bring to this commission. But that would probably be my request.
I didn't think, were we requiring this as part of the site plan approval process?
There was
No, I don't, there
confusion
must have
about
been some confusion about it.
Long ago.
I mean, there's ambiguity. Let's try to give Bud some guidance on the ambiguity. Personally, I didn't want to require this.
No, I don't, I think there might have been a misunderstanding. The buildings have to be iconic.
Right.
Well, I thought it was required. I thought that was the iconic element in the buildings.
Now, your buildings are
Well, we
awesome. Your
discussed
buildings
that.
stand on their own. They're
We
iconic
discussed that
enough.
iconic element for years. I mean, you said you call it the Eiffel Towers. We started with that
Yeah.
humongous entrance. But even, and back to, Mark's point about this, even if you just took off just kept the sign and the two pillars on each side and lots of plantings in there, that would be less overwhelming than you don't need all those other columns down the side, what have you. I'm not telling you how to do something. I'm just saying there's a simpler way to do it.
A lot cheaper way might be a vertical pole with a sign attached, vertical sign, and that's one of the things that guide the.
That's why,
The design that we showed in that first meeting, it wasn't out
Is that something that we want to develop?
We call wayfinding, but it's also something.
We have wayfinding, yeah, we're doing a package already. We're working through, it. We got our.
Literally being the first
I guess what I'd like to say right now,
had a voice.
we're not required to do it at all. That's my preference. I don't think it's,
To me, it's subdivision.
I think you need to do
We'd like to give you the flexibility.
I think people want to know they've arrived, because they've been hearing about this for 2 years.
Yeah, no.
That's Middle Farm. I just soon not call it Middle Farms. That's another.
Does this part of it need, like, I know we need to act on the canopy sign, because you have a tenant that,
I don't know that this needs to, unless the Vice Mayor's thought was to go ahead and change the ordinance anyway for future, but I'll wait.
but that might not reflect what ends up really being needed. That's the problem.
Well, that's true. I hate to give you 10 feet. And you
Here,
actually need 12 feet,
my
you know.
advice was the same as I mentioned the other day. Build them out and get them
And then we can
occupied
address this, yeah.
and see how that space is used. And what, if you want something, then we'll figure out what would fit and look right in that context. And then we could come back and we'd know more about it.
This don't
And we
fit.
could,
This right here don't fit.
no, well, that's what I'm saying. So
He must have quit.
we could table this part of the text amendment if that's okay. We'll go ahead and move forward with the canopy signs
Okay.
and that stuff, but this one, if that's all right with you, we'll just not include that for now, because we don't really know what we want to do there yet.
Yeah.
And we're open-minded to it, and obviously, we're not, we're not gonna hold up any COs because you don't have, this was not a required element. It was never my intent for that to be any kind of required element.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Can I ask him one question? It's kind of off topic, just because he happens to be here and we don't get to see Bud that much. There's rumors that continue to float on social media that I would love for you to address regarding, I think it's called subsidized housing and building on a wetland. Would you like to address some of that, please?
First of all, I'm not on social media, so I personally.
You're a wise man.
But I would be lying to say that I have a lot of friends and relatives that are on it, so if I want to hear it or not, I hear it. All I can say is that the apartment, multifamily, whatever you want to call it, for rent housing is not subsidized housing. It's not low rent housing. There's no governmental agency such as LIHTC or Section 8 that's involved. I think it's common knowledge that we did secure a TIF for the overall project to help defray costs dealing with a lot of corrections that need to be made out there to infrastructure. So I don't consider that a subsidy. And what was the other you mentioned?
The building on a wetland.
Well,
Yes, well, and so, Mark, I would love for you to address from the staff's point of view how we protect our wetlands. I mean,
Well, you can't do any disturbance in them, and there's actually a 25-foot buffer outside of the outer
The environmentally sensitive
delineated
area buffer.
wetland. Yeah, so it has a wetland buffer in the aquatic buffer ordinance right now.
and that's our ordinance, but that's also aligns with TDEC policy, is that correct? Or-
I'm
We
not
probably go
really
above and
sure
beyond.
what
We
their
do.
current
We do
policy.
more, we probably require,
Ours is a little
ours is
more-
tougher than TDEC.
Yeah, for wetlands, theirs is probably more restrictive, more protective.
A good
Okay.
example of that's those apartments down there across from the hospital.
There's some wetlands in that overall development, but they're staying out of those. They're barricaded off. They're not being disturbed or affected by this project, so,
We're permitted for everything we're doing.
yeah.
And if we're trying to do it in 11, we would not be.
And,
That's
and we
right.
know the town of Farragut would never let you do
Yeah,
it anyway.
yeah.
So that's
I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. I
Yeah,
appreciate
that's
it.
true.
Thank you.
Sorry I made this go so long.
No, that's okay.
It's been very helpful. I really, on one hand, I didn't want to have to go to the extra
Hopefully
step.
there's no
of having to
utilities.
look up, but I think this is
Good.
Yeah, we have to have that kind of guidance, because we don't know what to put on paper until we know kind of how the planning commission's feeling about it. We'll discuss this at April 30th at the staff developer meeting.
everybody is pleased with what they're seeing out there.
Absolutely.
It's been a long time coming.
Good job.
Come along.
Thank you.
It's all very
Thank you,
good.
Bud.
Excuse me, thank you. Yeah, all very good discussion. There are no utilities this evening.
No, sir.
With that, the time is approximately 8:54 PM, and without objection, the April 18th, 2024 Farragut Municipal Planning Commission meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.